We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be.
But as I constantly remind Canadians, there isn't really a Canadian economy anymore. It is a global economy. I know some people don't like it. It's a loss of national sovereignty, but it is a simple reality.
In 1938, the Bank of Canada, a privately owned corporation, was nationalized and given the mandate to make interest-free loans to the federal and provincial governments. It helped Canada rise from the ashes of the Great Depression, financed massive infrastructure, created hospitals and social programs. But something happened in 1974 when Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau took Canada into private meetings with the Bank of International Settlements, the bank of the central bankers of the world. This graph shows the results. Canada's debt relatively steady, then this. By 2018, Canada has paid over $1 trillion of just interest on its debt to the central bankers, at least twice the amount of the debt itself. Without parliamentary approval or a record of these pivotal negotiations, the senior Trudeau sold us out to a predacious banking cartel, leaving Canada now buried in the kind of debt that can never be repaid. After several years of litigation, constitutional lawyer Rocco Galati was unable to hold the Bank of Canada to account for its abdication of its mandate. These organizations are essentially private, foreign entities controlling Canada's banking system and socio-economic policies. All of our countries are in similar debt traps. The fantasy that job loss and bankrupt businesses have no connection to human health is kindergarten logic. This is what lockdowns feel like to a non-essential business owner. It's time we see our leaders for what they really are.
It really boils down to our ability to accept. We don't need pessimism. There are no limits.
It figures it would be something like this.
And realize that their wonderful personalities and best intentions have zero value in a financial system that has captured all of our flags.
Presidents, kings, queens, or monarchs do not run the world. It is run by world central banks because they control your modes of transaction and every single other thing you can imagine.
Catherine Austin Fitts, investment banker and former Assistant Secretary of Housing and Urban Development under George H.W. Bush, burst onto the COVID scene in 2020 in an interview with James Henry's Planet Lockdown. She told us essentially that Klaus Schwab's Great Reset is just the coffee table cover story for what should really be called the Going Direct Reset. On August 22, 2019, in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, months before the pandemic declaration, investment behemoth BlackRock, at an annual gathering of central bankers, presented a strategy for facing the next financial downturn, called Going Direct. With the help of John Titus, the Catherine Austin Fitts Salary Report has released a breakdown of what going direct actually means. Translated from the smokescreen and gobbledygook of financial speak, going direct meant that the central bankers were about to 1. Engineer a financial worldwide takedown of our Main Street economies by imposing central bank control of not only the worldwide economy, but of our governments and their fiscal policies, while putting trillions of dollars into the hands of Wall Street, so that Wall Street could then turn around and buy up our decimated Main Streets for pennies on the dollar. By going direct, the central banks have declared war on the citizens of the real world economy. If we had only been wearing the right pair of glasses, the red flags of money were flapping in front of our face, that COVID was not a pandemic. It was an economic seismic shift. When have our countries ever agreed on anything, much less everything? Travel and tourism, the lifeblood of so many economies, is suddenly brought to its knees where it has essentially stayed. Healthcare was suddenly ordered to scale back, causing layoffs and a never-ending backlog of canceled surgeries and clinics that are virtually empty. March 4th, when the WHO, in typical non-committal fashion, planted a seed in the minds of millions that cash might be a viral threat. And of course, the biggest red flag of all, the worldwide shutdown, re-shutting and shutting down again of local businesses, while top stock market box chains remained open indefinitely. The fiscal policy called non-essential enabled companies like Costco, Walmart, and Amazon, which live on the stock exchange, to steal the market share away from our independent economies.
In 2015, that was when I learned how money is created. And I just could not believe it. I thought, like everybody else, that money was something that our national banks were creating and that it's privately owned, privately controlled. And that was a huge shock for me in 2015.
The central banks are the mafia of our planet. The Bank of England, the model on which central banks are based, sits in the middle of Greater London on a square-mile patch of land called the City of London. But the City of London is a corporation with its own government and its own independent police force, and the Bank of England itself is a corporation. The Great Federal Reserve in New York City is federal nothing. It is also a corporation with shareholders. In 1913, President Woodrow Wilson signed a bill giving the Federal Reserve Corporation unprecedented power over the U.S. government and the world. And bank loans? If you think your commercial banks are risking their assets when they take a chance on you by granting you a loan, think again. Once a bank approves your loan, in this case say $100,000, it adds a matching $100,000 to the asset column of its own balance sheet. Instantly, it has just increased its own assets by loaning you money, and you will then spend years slowly adding yet another $100,000 to the bank as you work to pay back the loan plus interest. As John Titus demonstrates in some great videos, the Federal Reserve has been cleverly pumping made-up money into the hands of Wall Street as part of the Going Direct Reset plan. You can't lay people off, send them home on unpaid leave, force businesses out of business, and destroy livelihoods on the scale of COVID-19 without declaring a worldwide Great Depression. But this pumped-in money is creating the illusion that everything is perfectly fine. Keep on walking. The Going Direct Reset is about moving all of us onto a central bank digital currency, which will give the mafia unprecedented direct control over our society, your money, and you.
I would describe this as a slavery system.
The CBDCs are a major column in a series of columns being kept separate via the mainstream media's COVID-19 false narrative. The COVID injections are obfuscated from having any connection to 5G and the building of a digital smart grid that cannot exist without 5G. The banks and smart grid are clouded from having any connection to the health passports or to the eventual CBDCs. As Catherine Austin Fitts explains it, while each of these columns makes its way towards the middle, the invisible virus is used to distract the public from noticing any connection between the columns, so that when we finally realize what's actually happening, it's too late. The trap will have already been sprung. Banking, like drug company corruption, the questionable history of vaccines, media deception, the World Health Organization, the UN, national sovereignty, who really rules the planet, it has all been a steep learning curve for many of us who cannot close their eyes once they're open. Blind trust all along has been the mantra of the COVID narrative.
I'm not asking what's in the infusion. I'm not looking up all of the ingredients in the infusion. I am sticking out my arm.
And critical thinking skills have been prepackaged as a defect to be mocked by a herd of idiots. The truth is that common sense and critical thinking are the essence of an intelligent human being, and blind trust and the mocking of those who ask questions are the trademarks of stupidity. For those of us who are awake to the divide between fake and fact, this has been nothing but a nightmare. Yet being awake is your greatest asset when surrounded by a cult of masked-faced true believers who will follow the fake science to their own demise. They can never accept that their media gods tell lies or that their governments betray them. They would rather live in a flower-filled world of absolute nonsense than admit the existence of a not-so-Pollyanna reality. If their trusted TV anchors do not tell them they're being lied to, they will never believe it, and they'll drag us to the bottom of their pit of denial. But we can't let that happen, can we?